The morning I had my stroke, I was alone in my kitchen making coffee. I remember the smell of the grounds, the sound of the percolator, and then nothing. When I came back to myself, I was on the linoleum floor with the left side of my face, feeling like it belonged to someone else. The clock on the microwave said 7:14. I had no idea how long I had been down there. My name is Gerald. I am 68 years old. I spent 31 years teaching high school history in Dayton, Ohio. I coached the varsity debate team for 22 of those years. I like to think I was a man who taught young people how to think clearly, argue fairly, and treat others with dignity. It turns out I was not always so good at applying those lessons inside my own house. I managed to pull myself to the counter and get my phone. My hands were shaking. My vision kept blurring on the left side. I called my son, Marcus. He is 41 years old. He lives 23 minutes away. I know the exact distance because I used to make that drive twice a week after his mother passed, bringing him dinners I cooked myself because I was worried he was not eating right during the divorce. The phone rang 4 times. He picked up just before it went to voicemail. I told him something was wrong. I told him I was on the floor and I could not feel my face correctly. I told him I thought I needed an ambulance. He said, "Dad, are you sure you're not just dehydrated? You're always doing this." I want you to sit with that for a moment. I want you to understand that I was lying on my kitchen floor, 68 years old, unable to feel the left side of my face, and my son's first response was to suggest I was exaggerating. I told him I was not dehydrated. I told him something was genuinely wrong. He sighed. I heard it clearly through the phone. He said he had a meeting at 9 and that he would check on me after. He said to drink some water and try to stand up slowly. Then he hung up. I called 911 myself. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. The young woman who knelt beside me on the kitchen floor had red hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she spoke to me in the kind of calm, steady voice that people use when they are trying not to frighten you. She told me I had done the right thing calling when I did. She told me time mattered with strokes. At the hospital, they confirmed it was an ischemic stroke, moderate severity. The left side of my face had drooping. My speech was slightly slurred. My left-hand grip was significantly weakened. The neurologist, a quiet man named Dr. Okafor, told me I was fortunate I had called quickly. He said another hour on that floor, and we would be having a very different conversation. I was admitted to a room on the 4th floor, room 412. I remember the number because I stared at it from my bed for 2 days straight, waiting for someone I knew to walk through it. Marcus did not come that day. He did not come the next day either. On the second evening, a nurse named Dorothy came in to check my vitals. She was a heavy-set woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck and a way of moving through a room like she had all the time in the world and none of it to waste. She asked me if I had family coming. I told her my son knew where I was. She looked at me for a moment over her clipboard. She did not say anything. She did not have to. I lay there that second night, thinking about the choices that had brought me to room 412 with a weakened grip and a drooping face and no one sitting in the chair beside my bed. Let me tell you about Marcus, and let me be honest in a way I was not honest with myself for a long time. My son is a smart man. He got that honestly. He graduated near the top of his class at Ohio State and went into corporate finance. He makes more money in a month than I made in a year at the peak of my teaching career. From the outside, he looked like everything a father could want. But somewhere along the way, and I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly where Marcus learned that my love for him did not have a floor. He learned that no matter what he did, no matter how many times he canceled plans or forgot to call or showed up to Thanksgiving 2 hours late without an apology, I would still be there. I would still cook the dinner. I would still make the drive. His mother, Patricia, and I divorced when Marcus was 16. I will not pretend that was easy on him. I will not pretend I handled everything perfectly. But I have watched a lot of people use a difficult adolescence as a lifelong permission slip, and at some point somewhere around his late 30s, I started to wonder if that was what was happening with my son. The financial requests started small. $500 when he was between jobs at 33. $2,000 when his car needed a transmission at 35. I gave both without hesitation because that is what fathers do. Or so I told myself. Then the amounts grew. $8,000 toward the down payment on the house he and his then-wife Carla bought in 2019. I gave it because I had it and he needed it, and I could not bear the look on his face when he asked. Then Carla left. That was 2022. The divorce was ugly, and Marcus spent 6 months barely functional, and I drove those 23 minutes twice a week with food, and I listened, and I did not once say what I actually thought, which was that Carla had warned me privately, at a Christmas party in 2020, that she felt invisible in her own marriage. I did not say it because Marcus was my son, and she was gone, and what good would it do? After the divorce, he asked me for $22,000. He said it was to stabilize his finances during the settlement. He said he would pay it back within a year. I gave it to him. He did not pay it back. I did not say anything about it. Looking back now, from a hospital bed in room 412, I understood that my silence had taught him something. Every time I gave without requiring anything in return, every time I absorbed a slight or a cancellation or an unkind word and just kept showing up with food and money and patience, I taught my son that I was not a person with needs and limits. I taught him I was a resource. Dorothy came back on the morning of the third day. She brought me a better pillow from somewhere and adjusted my IV without being asked, and told me the speech therapy team would be by at 11. I asked her if she had children. She said she had 3 daughters and that all 3 of them annoyed her regularly and that she would walk through fire for any of them. I told her my son had not come. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mr. Gerald, some people don't know what they have until it's documented in writing that they might not get it." I thought about that for the rest of the day. On the afternoon of the third day, Marcus finally appeared in the doorway of room 412. He was dressed well, as he always was. He had his phone in his hand, which he put in his pocket when he saw me looking at it. He said he was sorry he had not come sooner, that work had been intense, that he had called the nurse's station to check on me. I was not aware of this call. I did not ask Dorothy about it later because I did not want to know the answer. He sat in the chair beside my bed and he looked at me with what I can only describe as discomfort. Not grief, not fear, not relief that I was alive. Discomfort, as though my situation was something happening to him. He asked the doctor how long my recovery would take. Dr. Notterhauf Okafor said it was too early to be certain, but that with consistent therapy I could expect meaningful improvement over the following 3 to 6 months. He said I would need support at home during the initial recovery period. He said I should not be driving for at least 8 weeks. I watched Marcus's face during this. I watched something move behind his eyes. He was calculating. He asked Dr. Okafor to step out for a moment. Dr. Okafor looked at me. I nodded. When it was just the 2 of us, Marcus leaned forward in his chair. He said that he had been thinking, and that given the situation, given that I clearly could not be living alone and managing a house of that size anymore, it might be time to consider simplifying things. I asked him what he meant by simplifying things. He said the house was too big for one person. He said the neighborhood had appreciated significantly. He said if I sold now, I could move into a very comfortable senior living facility and have plenty left over, and it would take the burden off me. I want to be clear about the house he was referring to. It is the house where I lived with Patricia for 19 years. It is the house where Marcus grew up, where I still have a closet full of his childhood baseball trophies because he has never come to get them. It is paid off completely. It is worth somewhere near $420,000 in the current market. I know this because I had it appraised 8 months before my stroke, for reasons I will explain shortly. I looked at my son sitting in that chair. I looked at the phone-shaped rectangle pressed against his thigh through his slacks. I thought about the $22,000. I thought about Patricia's Christmas party warning. I thought about 2 days on the kitchen floor that I had not actually spent on the kitchen floor but might as well have, for all the difference it made to him. I said, "I'll think about it." He nodded. He said that was all he was asking. He stayed for another 40 minutes, most of which he spent on his phone in the hallway outside my room. He kissed me on the forehead before he left, the way you might say goodbye to an obligation you have fulfilled. That night I asked Dorothy if she could help me make a phone call. Her name was Renee. She had been one of my debate students in 1999. She was quiet and serious and a little lonely in the way that very intelligent teenagers sometimes are, and she had a gift for building an argument from the ground up, like you were laying bricks. I kept in touch with her the way I kept in touch with a handful of students over the years, a card at Christmas, a text when I saw something in the news she would appreciate. She had gone to law school. She specialized in estate planning and elder law. She was 42 years old and a partner at a firm in Columbus. I had actually called Renee 8 months before my stroke. I had called her because I had been doing a lot of thinking, not because I was ill or frightened, but because I was 67 years old and a retired history teacher, and I understood better than most people that the present is always moving toward the future, and it is better to act clearly before a crisis than desperately during one. I told her about Marcus, not in an angry way, in a factual way. I told her about the pattern. I told her what I had given and what had not been returned, and what I had noticed and what I was afraid was coming. Renee listened the way she used to listen in debate practice, completely still, processing everything before she spoke. Then she told me what I needed to do. Over the following 3 months, before the stroke, I had updated my will. I had placed the house and my primary investment accounts into a revocable living trust. I had named Renee as the successor trustee. I had written a specific letter of instruction, signed and notarized, that outlined exactly what I wanted to happen with my assets and under what conditions. I had also written a separate document, not legally binding in the technical sense, but morally clear, addressed to Marcus, explaining my decisions and what he would need to demonstrate over time to see any meaningful change in them. Marcus was not removed entirely from my plans, but his inheritance was restructured. It was no longer automatic. It was conditional on documented evidence of a functional relationship, verified by Renee at her discretion at the time of my death. The house was not available for sale. I was the sole trustee of a living trust, and I had no intention of dissolving it. None of this was hidden. It was simply not something Marcus had ever thought to ask about, because it had never occurred to him that I might have acted first. On the 6th day, Dorothy told me a woman had called the nurse's station asking about my condition and whether I had been receiving visitors. Dorothy said she had described herself as a former student. Dorothy, who had by this point formed her own opinions about the visitor situation in room 412, had told her that I was stable and that the visiting hours were 8 to 8. Renee arrived the next morning with a coffee from the place I liked on 5th Street. She sat in the chair beside my bed, and she did not bring her phone out once. She asked me how I was feeling, and she meant it. I told her what Marcus had said about selling the house. She nodded slowly. She asked if he had mentioned power of attorney. I said not yet. She said it would come. She said that was typically the next step in this kind of situation, and that I should be prepared for it, and that I should simply tell him that I already had a plan in place, and that she was my contact for any legal matters going forward. She said I should not argue about it or explain too much. She said just those 2 sentences and no more. She stayed for 2 hours. She helped me with my speech exercises. She beat me comprehensively at 2 games of cards. Before she left, she squeezed my hand, the right one, because the left was still unreliable, and she told me I was going to be fine. I believed her. Marcus came back on the 8th day. He looked more prepared this time. He had a folder with him. He sat down and he said that he had done some research and that he thought it would be a good idea, given my health situation, for me to sign over a durable power of attorney to him so he could manage my affairs if my condition deteriorated. He slid the folder across the tray table toward me. I looked at the folder. I looked at my son. I thought about room 412 and 2 empty days, and a phone he put in his pocket too late. I said, I already have a plan in place. Renee Caldwell is my contact for all legal matters going forward. Marcus stared at me. I said, You remember Renee? She was in my debate class. She's an estate attorney in Columbus. He said, What does that mean? I said, It means what I said. He asked me what I had done. His voice had an edge to it that I had not heard before, or perhaps had been hearing for years and choosing not to name. I told him that I loved him and that I had not done anything out of anger. I told him that I had made careful, considered decisions about my own life while I was healthy and clear-headed, which is when such decisions should be made. I told him that those decisions were already documented, and that no conversation in a hospital room was going to change them. He stood up. He said I was being paranoid. He said he was only trying to help. He said that everything he had suggested was completely normal, and that most parents were grateful when their children stepped up. I said, Most children step up before the 9th day. He left the folder on my tray table. He left the room. He did not say goodbye. Dorothy appeared in the doorway about 10 minutes later. I did not ask how much she had heard. She came over and picked up the folder from my tray table without looking at it, and placed it on the windowsill out of my line of sight. Then she checked my blood pressure and wrote something in my chart and told me my numbers looked good. I said, "Dorothy, was I too hard on him?" She took off her reading glasses and let them hang on their chain. She said, "Mr. Gerald, you had a stroke and he came on day 3 with a folder. I've been a nurse for 29 years. You were not too hard on him." I was discharged 11 days after I was admitted. Renee had arranged for a home health aide to come every morning for the first 3 weeks. Her name was Sue, a practical, no-nonsense woman from Kettering who made excellent oatmeal and was completely uninterested in my feelings about physical therapy, which is exactly what I needed. Marcus did not call for 19 days after he left the folder on my tray table. When he finally called, his voice was different. The edge was gone. He sounded smaller, somehow, like a version of himself from further back. He did not mention the folder, or Renee, or the house. He asked how my speech exercises were going. He asked if I was sleeping all right. He asked if there was anything I needed. I said my grip strength was coming back. I said I was sleeping better. I said I had everything I needed. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he was sorry he had not come sooner when I called from the floor. I had been waiting for a long time for something like those words. I had been waiting through the $22,000 and the canceled Christmases and Carla's quiet warning and 2 days in room 412 without a visitor. I had been waiting so long I was not sure I would feel anything when it finally came. I felt something. I want to be honest about that. I felt something open in my chest that had been pressed shut for longer than I wanted to admit. But I also knew, in the way that a retired history teacher knows, that words are the beginning of a record, not the record itself. I told him I appreciated him saying that. I told him I wanted us to have a real relationship, not the one we had been performing for the past several years. I told him that if he wanted that too, I was willing to work toward it, and that Renee being in my life was not going to change, and that I was not going to sell the house, and that I needed him to come to me as my son, not as someone managing an estate that was not yet available to be managed. He said, "Okay, Dad," just those 2 words, but he said them like he meant them. He came to the house 2 Saturdays later. He carried in groceries I had not asked him to bring. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had hit the floor 4.5 weeks earlier, and he drank coffee, and he asked me questions about my therapy, and he did not take his phone out once in 2 hours. I noticed. I did not say anything about it. I just noticed. I am not going to tell you that everything changed from that Saturday on, because I am 68 years old, and I have read enough history to know that real change is slow and it goes backwards sometimes, and it is proven in the accumulation of ordinary days, not in a single conversation. I am watching. I am grateful. And I am watching. What I will tell you is this. The morning I was on my kitchen floor, I had already done the most important thing. I had not done it out of spite. I had not done it as a punishment or a manipulation or a threat. I had done it because I was a retired history teacher who understood that the best time to act is before the crisis, not during it, and because a quiet, serious girl from my 1999 debate class had grown up to be someone who knew how to build a case from the ground up and had answered the phone when I called. Sue finished her 3 weeks with me, and I gave her a card with a gift certificate to the garden center on Wilmington Pike because she had mentioned once, briefly, that she liked dahlias. Dorothy and I exchanged Christmas cards. I sent her a poinsettia last December. She sent me back a card with a note that said she had told the story to her 3 daughters as a cautionary tale and that the eldest had laughed, and then gone quiet and then called her own father. I can walk without assistance now. My grip strength in my left hand is back to about 80%, which Dr. Okafor says is better than he expected. I still have some slurring when I am tired. I do my exercises every morning at the kitchen counter, in the same spot where I went down, which I do on purpose because I believe in looking at things directly. The house is mine. The trust is in place. My records are in order. And on most Saturdays, my son sits at my kitchen table and drinks coffee and does not take out his phone. That is not everything I wanted, but it is real. And after a long time of accepting things that were not real because I was afraid of having nothing, I have learned to understand the difference.